My name is Olivia Morgan, and at 28, I thought I had learned to accept failure. 3 rejection letters from Westfield Medical School sat framed on my apartment wall, not as motivation, but as reminders of my limitations. Each letter bore the same polite language about highly competitive applicants and insufficient clinical experience. What they didn't mention was that my undergraduate GPA of 3.9 in biochemistry, my research publications, and my volunteer work at free clinics apparently meant nothing when your last name wasn't carved into a hospital wing. The final rejection came with particularly cruel timing. I had just buried my grandmother, the woman who raised me after my parents died in a car accident when I was 12. She had worked double shifts as a hospital janitor to put me through college, always believing I would become the doctor she never could be. Her last words to me were about how proud she was that I would help people the way the doctors had helped her. I couldn't tell her about the rejections. I let her die believing in a dream that seemed impossible. Working as a research assistant at a pharmaceutical company wasn't exactly where I had envisioned myself, but it paid the bills and kept me connected to medicine. My supervisor, Dr. Marcus Whitman, was a Westfield Medical School alumnus who never let me forget it. He had graduated 15 years ago with mediocre grades, but possessed something I apparently lacked: the right connections. His father had donated millions to the school, ensuring Marcus's acceptance despite academic performance that paled compared to mine. Now he lorded over our small research team with the authority of someone who believed his success was entirely earned. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was conducting research that could potentially save lives while being deemed unworthy of medical school. Our current project focused on developing treatments for a rare genetic disorder called Whitmore's syndrome, which caused progressive muscle weakness and typically proved fatal within 5 years of diagnosis. The condition affected roughly 1 in 50,000 people, making it an orphan disease that most pharmaceutical companies ignored due to limited profit potential. However, our company had taken on the project after receiving substantial government grants. My colleagues treated me with the casual dismissiveness reserved for those they considered intellectually inferior. During lab meetings, they would explain basic concepts to me as if I hadn't spent 4 years studying advanced biochemistry. When I suggested alternative research approaches, they would exchange glances before dismissing my ideas without serious consideration. Dr. Sarah Chen, another Westfield graduate, once told me that some people are meant to support real scientists rather than become them. The comment stung because Sarah had been my friend in undergraduate school before medical school transformed her into someone I barely recognized. The breakthrough came during one of those late nights when I was alone in the lab, running experiments that others considered routine busy work. I had been analyzing protein structures related to Whitmore's syndrome when I noticed an unusual pattern in the molecular configurations. Something about the enzyme interactions reminded me of research I had read about a completely different condition, one that had been successfully treated with a combination of existing medications. The connection was subtle, requiring deep understanding of biochemical pathways that most researchers wouldn't immediately recognize. I spent the next 3 weeks quietly verifying my hypothesis, running additional tests, and cross-referencing my findings with published literature. The more I investigated, the more convinced I became that I had discovered something significant. The treatment approach I was developing didn't require expensive new drug development. Instead, it involved a specific combination of FDA-approved medications used in precise dosages and timing. If my calculations were correct, this protocol could not only halt the progression of Whitmore's syndrome, but potentially reverse some of the muscle damage in early-stage patients. The ethical dilemma kept me awake at night. Should I share my findings with Dr. Whitman and the team, knowing they would likely claim credit for my discovery? Or should I find another way to bring this treatment to the patients who desperately needed it? I thought about my grandmother's faith in me, about the rejection letters on my wall, and about the dozens of Whitmore syndrome patients whose lives hung in the balance. The decision became clear when I learned that Dr. Whitman had arrived. Whitman was preparing to present our team's collaborative research at the upcoming International Medical Research Conference, a presentation that would certainly advance his career while keeping mine stagnant. I decided to document everything meticulously before making any moves. Every experiment, every calculation, every reference was recorded with timestamps and photographs. I created multiple backup copies of my research, storing them in different locations and formats. If anyone was going to claim credit for this discovery, they would have to explain how they had developed these findings without any of the supporting documentation that only I possessed. My grandmother had taught me that sometimes you have to fight for what's right, even when the odds seem impossible. The opportunity to act came sooner than expected. Dr. Whitman announced that he would be presenting our research to a special panel that included administrators from Westfield Medical School, looking to identify promising research partnerships. He scheduled the presentation for the following week, giving me just enough time to implement my plan. I reached out to Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a researcher I had met at a conference the previous year who worked at a competing pharmaceutical company. Elena had impressed me with her integrity and her commitment to patient advocacy over profit margins. I arranged to meet Elena at a coffee shop near the university, bringing copies of my research documentation. As I explained my findings, I watched her expression change from polite interest to genuine excitement to something approaching awe. She immediately grasped the implications of my discovery and the elegance of the treatment protocol I had developed. "Olivia," she said, leaning forward intently, "do you understand what you've accomplished here? This could help thousands of people. We need to get this information to the right people immediately." Elena introduced me to Dr. James Morrison, the Director of Rare Disease Research at the National Institutes of Health. Dr. Morrison reviewed my findings with a team of independent experts who confirmed the validity of my research and the potential effectiveness of my proposed treatment protocol. Within days, he was coordinating with the FDA to fast-track clinical trials based on my work. The speed of their response reflected both the urgency of addressing Whitmore syndrome and the solid scientific foundation of my research. Meanwhile, Dr. Whitman remained oblivious to these developments as he prepared for his presentation. He had assigned me to create the visual aids and compile the supporting data, never suspecting that I was simultaneously working with federal researchers to bring the same discovery to light through proper channels. The irony was delicious. He was asking me to help him steal credit for work he didn't even fully understand. I complied with his requests while secretly hoping he would have enough integrity to acknowledge my contributions when the time came. The day of the presentation arrived with all the pomp and circumstance Dr. Whitman had anticipated. The conference room at Westfield Medical School was filled with distinguished faculty members, pharmaceutical executives, and medical research luminaries. I sat in the back row, having been relegated to the role of technical support should any questions arise about the data compilation. Dr. Whitman stood at the podium in his expensive suit, radiating confidence as he prepared to claim credit for what he believed was team research that would elevate his status in the medical community. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dr. Whitman began, "I'm pleased to present groundbreaking research that our team has developed regarding potential treatments for Whitmore syndrome." He clicked through slides showing the protein analysis, the molecular pathway diagrams, and the treatment protocol, all based on my work. The audience listened attentively as he explained the science with the superficial understanding of someone who had reviewed the materials but hadn't developed them. Several audience members asked detailed questions that he answered with rehearsed responses I had helped him prepare. The trap was set perfectly when Dr. Margaret Hutchinson, the dean of Westfield Medical School, asked a complex question about the enzyme interaction mechanisms underlying the treatment protocol. Dr. Whitman's confident expression faltered slightly as he realized the question required deeper understanding than his preparation had provided. He stammered through a partial response before suggesting that perhaps his research assistant could provide additional technical details. All eyes turned to me as I stood up from the back row, my heart pounding with anticipation. "Thank you, Dr. Whitman," I said, walking toward the front of the room. "I'd be happy to explain the enzyme interactions, since I'm the one who discovered them." A murmur rippled through the audience as I pulled out my phone and connected it to the presentation system. In fact, I have some additional information that might interest everyone here. The slides I displayed showed the NIH documentation, the FDA fast-track approval letters, and the independent verification of my research, all bearing my name as the primary investigator. The room fell silent as the implications became clear. Dr. Morrison had provided me with a letter confirming that I was the sole originator of the research and that clinical trials would begin within 60 days based on my protocol. The letter specifically noted that I had brought this discovery to the NIH independently, seeking to ensure that patients could access this treatment as quickly as possible rather than waiting for traditional pharmaceutical development timelines. The audience's attention shifted dramatically from Dr. Whitman to me as they realized what they were witnessing. "Some of you may remember me," I continued, looking directly at Dean Hutchinson. "Olivia Morgan. You rejected my medical school application 3 times, citing insufficient qualifications and limited research experience." I gestured toward the presentation screen, showing my research credentials. This treatment protocol that Dr. Whitman just presented as team research was developed entirely by me, working alone in the lab during evening hours over the past several months. Every calculation, every experiment, every breakthrough moment, mine. Dr. Whitman's face had gone pale as he realized the magnitude of his situation. Not only had he just publicly claimed credit for research that wasn't his, but he had done so in front of the very people who controlled his career prospects. Several audience members were already pulling out their phones, undoubtedly to verify the information I had presented. The pharmaceutical executives looked particularly uncomfortable, knowing that their association with attempted research theft could damage their company's reputations and their relationships with federal research agencies. "The most interesting part," I continued, "is that this research represents exactly the kind of innovative thinking and dedication to patient welfare that medical schools claim to value in their applicants. Yet somehow, the same institution that deemed me unqualified to study medicine is now witnessing me solve a medical problem that has stumped researchers for decades. I have to wonder what other talented individuals have been overlooked because they didn't have the right connections or come from the right families." The aftermath was swift and brutal for those who had underestimated me. Dr. Whitman was immediately suspended pending an investigation into research misconduct. The pharmaceutical company launched their own internal review, ultimately terminating his employment and barring him from future research positions. His reputation in the medical research community was permanently damaged, ensuring that his career prospects would be severely limited regardless of any legal consequences. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that his attempt to advance his career through my work had instead destroyed it entirely. Dean Hutchinson approached me after the presentation, her expression a mixture of embarrassment and calculation. "Ms. Morgan," she said carefully, "I think there may have been some misunderstandings regarding your medical school applications. Given your obvious qualifications and research capabilities, I'd like to discuss potential opportunities for you to join our program." The offer that had been denied to me 3 times was now being presented desperately. But the power dynamic had shifted completely. I was no longer a supplicant begging for acceptance. I was someone whose expertise they needed. "Thank you for the offer, Dean Hutchinson," I replied, "but I've already accepted a position as Director of Rare Disease Research at the National Institutes of Health." Dr. Morrison was impressed enough with my work to create the position specifically for me. I'll be overseeing clinical trials for my Whitmore syndrome treatment while developing protocols for other orphan diseases. The salary is considerably higher than what most medical school graduates earn, and the opportunity to help patients is immediate rather than delayed by years of additional education. The NIH position was everything I had hoped medical school would provide and more. I was conducting meaningful research that directly impacted patient lives, working with brilliant colleagues who valued innovation over pedigree, and earning recognition for my contributions to medical science. The patients enrolled in the clinical trials were responding even better than my preliminary research had suggested, with some showing remarkable improvement in muscle function and quality of life. My grandmother's dream of me helping people was finally being realized, just not in the way either of us had originally imagined. 6 months later, the first phase of clinical trials concluded with unprecedented success rates. 93% of participants showed significant improvement, with many experiencing partial reversal of muscle deterioration that had been considered irreversible. The medical journals that had once seemed impossibly out of reach were now competing to publish my research. Speaking invitations arrived weekly from medical conferences, universities, and research institutions around the world. The same community that had rejected me was now eager to claim association with my success. Dr. Sarah Chen, my former friend who had suggested I wasn't meant to be a real scientist, reached out through mutual acquaintances requesting a meeting. She had been struggling in her residency program and hoped that our past friendship might help her secure a research position in my lab. The conversation was awkward, with Sarah alternating between congratulations and subtle requests for professional assistance. I listened politely, but declined to offer her any opportunities, explaining that my team required demonstrated commitment to patient welfare over personal advancement. The rejection letters still hang on my wall, but now they serve a different purpose. They remind me that worth isn't determined by institutional approval or social connections, but by the impact of your contributions to the world. Medical school might have provided a traditional path to helping patients, but sometimes the unconventional route leads to greater achievements. My grandmother was right about me becoming someone who helps people. She just couldn't have predicted the extraordinary journey that would make it possible. The Whitmore syndrome treatment protocol is now in its final phase of clinical trials, with FDA approval expected within the next 6 months. Pharmaceutical companies are competing to license the production rights, ensuring that patients worldwide will have access to affordable treatment. The royalties from these licensing agreements will provide financial security I never imagined possible. But more importantly, they represent validation that talent and determination can overcome institutional barriers. Looking back, I realized that those rejection letters were the best thing that ever happened to me. Medical school would have constrained my thinking within traditional frameworks and delayed my entry into meaningful research by years. Instead, I was free to approach problems from unique angles, unconstrained by conventional wisdom or academic hierarchies. Sometimes the path that seems like failure is actually preparation for success that exceeds your original dreams. The final irony came when Westfield Medical School invited me to deliver their commencement address, an honor typically reserved for distinguished alumni. I accepted the invitation, seeing it as an opportunity to speak to other students who might be facing rejection or discrimination. My message was simple. Your value isn't determined by who accepts you, but by what you accomplish despite their rejection. The ovation was thunderous, and several graduates approached me afterward to share their own stories of overcoming institutional barriers. Today, as I sit in my NIH office reviewing applications for our expanded rare disease research program, I think about all the talented individuals who might be working in laboratories or clinics, developing innovations that could change medicine, despite being told they weren't qualified for traditional paths. My job now includes identifying and supporting these overlooked talents, ensuring that the next generation of medical breakthroughs isn't limited by artificial barriers or social prejudices. The cure I discovered has now helped over 3,000 patients worldwide, with that number growing daily as treatment becomes more widely available. Children who were facing shortened lifespans are now playing sports and planning college careers. Adults who had resigned themselves to progressive disability are returning to work and rebuilding their lives. Every success story validates my grandmother's belief that I was meant to help people, even if the path looked nothing like what we had originally envisioned.